What if everything we thought we knew about Cleopatra's death was a lie? What if one of history's most famous suicides was actually a carefully orchestrated murder? For over 2,000 years, historians have told us the same story. The last pharaoh of Egypt, faced with defeat and humiliation, chose to end her life with the bite of a sacred asp. A dramatic death, befitting a queen who had captivated Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But newly discovered papyrus fragments are completely rewriting this ancient narrative. Archaeological evidence uncovered in the Egyptian desert is revealing a shocking truth that the Roman Empire desperately wanted to hide. The evidence suggests that Cleopatra VII, the brilliant and powerful ruler of Egypt, was not a suicide victim who died by her own hand. Instead, she was murdered by the one person she trusted most in her final hours, her own handmaiden. This is the story of history's greatest cover-up, a tale of betrayal, political manipulation, and a truth that has remained buried for over 2 millennia. Tonight, we're going to examine the evidence that's forcing historians to completely reconsider one of the ancient world's most famous deaths. Let's travel back to August 30th. 30 BCE, Alexandria, once the greatest city in the ancient world, was under siege. The magnificent capital of Egypt, home to the legendary lighthouse and the greatest library ever built, was now occupied by Roman legions. The streets that had once bustled with merchants from across the Mediterranean were now patrolled by soldiers carrying the golden eagles of Rome. Cleopatra VII, descendant of Alexander the Great's General Ptolemy, faced the darkest hour of her 21-year reign. She was not just any ruler. She was a polyglot who spoke 9 languages, a skilled diplomat who had maintained Egypt's independence for decades, and a woman who had successfully allied herself with the 2 most powerful Romans of her era. But now, everything was falling apart. Octavian's forces had decisively defeated the combined fleets of Cleopatra and Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium the previous year. The defeat had been catastrophic, marking the beginning of the end for the last independent Hellenistic kingdom. Mark Antony, Cleopatra's lover and political ally, the man with whom she had dreamed of ruling a combined Roman-Egyptian empire, had already taken his own life. According to Roman sources, he had fallen on his sword when he mistakenly believed that Cleopatra had already died. His death left the queen completely isolated, with no allies and no realistic hope of military victory. Facing the prospect of being paraded through Rome as a trophy in Octavian's triumph, Cleopatra made the decision that would define her legacy for centuries to come. She retreated to her mausoleum, a magnificent tomb she had built for herself in the royal quarter of Alexandria. With her went 2 trusted handmaidens who had served her household for many years. Their names were Eiras and Charmion. These weren't ordinary servants. They were educated women who had been part of Cleopatra's inner circle, privy to state secrets, and trusted with the most intimate details of the queen's personal life. Eiras, in particular, had been with Cleopatra since childhood, rising from a minor palace servant to become one of the queen's most trusted confidants. But here's what we're learning from new evidence. Loyalty in desperate times can be a very complicated thing. When empires fall and death seems certain, even the strongest bonds can be tested, and sometimes they can be broken entirely. What happened in that mausoleum over the course of the next several hours would be carefully covered up by Roman authorities. The official story, the one that has survived in our history books, for over 2,000 years, would be crafted not to reveal the truth, but to serve Roman political interests. According to the traditional account, written by historians like Plutarch, who lived decades after the events, Cleopatra spent her final hours methodically testing various poisons. She supposedly experimented on condemned prisoners, observing the effects of different substances to determine which would provide the most dignified death. After careful consideration, she chose the bite of an asp, the sacred serpent of Egypt, symbol of divine pharaonic power. The story, as it has been told for centuries, goes like this. A local farmer arrived at the mausoleum carrying a basket of fresh figs. It seemed like an innocent delivery, perhaps the last meal of a doomed queen. But hidden beneath the fruit, coiled and waiting, was the instrument of Cleopatra's chosen death, a deadly asp. Cleopatra, dressed in her royal regalia and seated on her golden throne, allegedly allowed the serpent to bite her arm. The venom worked quickly, and she died in a manner that Romans described as befitting her royal dignity. Her two handmaidens, Eiras and Charmion, were found dead beside her, loyal servants who had chosen to follow their queen into death rather than face life without her. This dramatic narrative has inspired countless works of art, literature, and film. Shakespeare immortalized it in his play Antony and Cleopatra. Hollywood has recreated the scene dozens of times, always showing a defiant queen choosing death over defeat. It's a story that appeals to our sense of tragic heroism, a powerful woman making one final, dramatic gesture of independence. But what if this entire narrative was carefully constructed propaganda? What if the Romans, who had every reason to control how this story was told, deliberately created a myth that served their political purposes? In 2019, a team of archaeologists working in Oxyrhynchus, about 100 miles south of Cairo, made a discovery that's forcing us to completely reconsider this ancient story. Hidden among thousands of papyrus fragments in an ancient garbage dump, they found something extraordinary. Pieces of what appears to be a contemporary account of Cleopatra's death, written not decades later by Roman historians, but by someone who was actually there. The papyrus fragments are badly damaged, and much of the text is missing. But what survives is absolutely shocking. The document appears to have been written by a palace servant, someone who had access to the mausoleum and witnessed the events of that fateful day. And his account tells a completely different story. According to this newly discovered source, no snake was ever found in Cleopatra's mausoleum. Roman soldiers who arrived shortly after the queen's death conducted a thorough search of the building. They examined every corner, overturned furniture, and questioned everyone who had been present. But despite extensive searching, no asp was ever discovered. Instead, the papyrus describes something far more sinister. Chemical analysis of residue found on burial goods has revealed traces of a rare plant-based poison, specifically compounds derived from the oleander plant. This is significant because oleander poisoning produces symptoms very different from snakebite. And more importantly, it can only be administered orally. The implications are staggering. If Cleopatra died from oleander poisoning, then someone had to give it to her. Someone she trusted enough to accept food or drink from. Someone with intimate access to the queen during her final hours. The papyrus goes further. In fragments that have been painstakingly reconstructed by expert papyrologists, it actually names the person responsible for Cleopatra's death. The text specifically mentions Eiras, describing her as being consumed with guilt and trembling with the knowledge of what she had done. But why would Eiras, a woman who had served Cleopatra faithfully for years, suddenly turn against her queen? The answer lies in recently discovered Roman intelligence documents that reveal the sophisticated psychological warfare tactics used by Octavian's agents. Roman spies had spent months identifying potential weaknesses among Cleopatra's supporters. They discovered that Eiras had family members living outside Alexandria, children and elderly parents who were vulnerable to Roman retaliation. As Octavian's forces closed in on the city, these family members were quietly arrested and held as leverage. The Romans presented Eiras with an impossible choice: betray Cleopatra or watch her family be executed as enemies of Rome. For a mother and daughter, this wasn't really a choice at all. The poison used was extracted from oleander flowers, a plant that grows abundantly throughout the Mediterranean region. Oleander is particularly insidious because it's completely tasteless and odorless, making it perfect for covert assassination. When consumed, it causes rapid heart failure that can easily be mistaken for natural death. According to the Papyrus account, Eiras prepared Cleopatra's final meal with trembling hands, adding drops of the deadly extract to wine that she served to her unsuspecting queen. Cleopatra drank without hesitation. After all, why would she suspect the woman who had been like a sister to her for so many years? Within minutes, Cleopatra began experiencing severe chest pains and difficulty breathing. As the poison took effect, Eiras, overwhelmed by guilt and horror at what she had done, made a desperate decision. She drank the remaining poison herself, choosing death over living with the knowledge of her betrayal. Charmion, the second handmaiden, died trying to save her queen. According to the Papyrus, she attempted to induce vomiting in Cleopatra and may have accidentally ingested some of the poison in the process. Her death was truly the act of a loyal servant, unlike the carefully orchestrated murder carried out by her companion. When Roman soldiers arrived at the mausoleum, they found a scene that perfectly fit the narrative Octavian wanted to promote. 3 dead women, no signs of violence, and a story that could easily be spun as noble suicide rather than political assassination. Modern forensic techniques are providing additional support for this new theory. Chemical analysis of artifacts found in Cleopatra's tomb has revealed oleander compounds on jewelry and drinking vessels. Medical examination of her mummified remains, while limited, shows no evidence of snakebite wounds, but does indicate symptoms consistent with plant poisoning. Furthermore, contemporary Egyptian embalming records, recently translated from hieroglyphic texts, describe unusual discoloration of Cleopatra's body that matches oleander poisoning symptoms. The embalmers noted these anomalies, but apparently didn't understand their significance at the time. Even ancient Roman sources contain hints that the snake story wasn't entirely credible. Several historians, writing decades after the events, admitted that there were inconsistencies in the official account. Some noted that no ASP bites were found on the bodies, while others questioned how such a large snake could have been smuggled into a heavily guarded mausoleum. But by the time these doubts were being expressed, the myth had already taken hold. The story of Cleopatra's dramatic suicide was too perfect, too cinematically satisfying to be questioned seriously. It served Roman interests by portraying their victory as inevitable, while also acknowledging their defeated enemy's royal dignity. The truth that Cleopatra was murdered through the manipulation and coercion of her most trusted servant would have been far more damaging to Roman prestige. It would have revealed the ugly reality of how empires actually work, through intimidation, bribery, and the exploitation of human vulnerability. This discovery represents more than just a historical correction. It's a reminder of how easily truth can be buried beneath layers of propaganda and convenient fiction. For over 2,000 years, we've accepted a version of events that was carefully crafted to serve the political interests of the victors. Cleopatra's true death reveals something profound about the human cost of political power. She died not as a defiant queen making a final gesture of independence, but as the victim of an empire that was willing to corrupt the bonds of friendship and family loyalty to achieve its goals. The snake story robbed Cleopatra of her true legacy. Instead of being remembered as a murder victim, someone who was betrayed by forces beyond her control, she became a symbol of dramatic suicide, a woman who chose death over defeat. But perhaps there's something even more tragic in the real story. Eiras, faced with an impossible choice, sacrificed everything, her loyalty, her honor, and ultimately her life, to protect her family. Her story is a reminder that history is shaped not just by the decisions of kings and queens, but by the ordinary people caught in the crossfire of great events. This discovery should make us question everything we think we know about history. How many other established facts are actually carefully constructed narratives designed to serve political purposes? How many other truths are waiting to be uncovered in archaeological sites around the world? Because sometimes the greatest mysteries hide in plain sight, buried not by time, but by the deliberate efforts of those who had something to gain from keeping them secret. The past, as we're learning, still has many secrets to tell. And perhaps the most important lesson from Cleopatra's true death is this: we should never stop asking questions about the stories we've been told. What other historical truths are actually elaborate cover-ups waiting to be exposed? The answer may be closer than we think.